Begin. All right. So thank you everyone for being here. Uh, and again, it's been a long couple of weeks without you guys, so I'm glad to be back. Um, so the US media is filled with stories that Iran is winning. And every time, Trump considers going to the negotiating table to sit down with the Iranians, you get this term taco, Trump always chickens out. That begins to circulate around social media, and it's happening again today. So the question I want to ask today is Iran really winning? And is Trump about to surrender? Okay. And um, just to make it crystal clear, I want to make it real for you. Hillary Clinton was interviewed yesterday, and I'm going to quote her. She said, "I worry that the United States is now in a very weak position vis-a-vis Iran. We're in a situation now where we are weak, where we have lost the leverage and initiative that we had." So I'm just quoting Hillary Clinton, but every time I pick up the Wall Street Journal and read an article by a so-called expert, or the New York Times, even more so, or the Financial Times, or I listen to Bloomberg Radio, or I watch any of the news stations, this is the sentiment expressed by Hillary Clinton that the US is up against the wall. We've completely miscalculated. We've done a terrible job in this war. We've planned badly. We shouldn't have even fought this war. And we have no choice but to back down now and cave into Iran. And Iran is going to emerge from this war stronger than ever. Okay, that is the overwhelming sentiment in the media and expressed by the experts. Now, as we enter today's session, uh, the markets are swirling with rumors. They began yesterday, even more so today, that the U.S. representatives, J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner, will be sent by Trump back to Islamabad, Pakistan, for another round of negotiations to end this war. So the sentiment that Trump is about to chicken out again are those rumors are running full steam ahead. Now, to understand better these ideas, I want to take a look at the reasons why the meetings that took place last weekend, why they broke down. Okay. And we can learn something from understanding why exactly those negotiations broke down. Oh, before we get there, I also want to say another big rumor that's circulating, and I believe these rumors, by the way, have merit. I do think there's a very good chance that in the next few days, Vance, Witkoff, and Kushner could be headed back to Pakistan for another round of negotiations. The other rumor that's circulating is that the Trump administration and Iran are about to agree to extending the ceasefire, which is due to end next Tuesday, to extend that for an additional 2 weeks. I think all of these things could be happening. I think it's very realistic. But that does not mean we're losing, and it doesn't mean that Trump is about to back down. Now, why did the last set of negotiations, which took place last weekend, why did those go nowhere? And why did the U.S. ultimately walk out of the room and our representatives fly back to the United States? Well, Iran showed up to the negotiations with a set of outrageous demands. And I'm going to just name 6 of those demands. Number one, Iran demanded war reparations. That is, they were demanding that the United States pay for damages that Iran has suffered so far during the war. Okay, that's their first demand. Crazy. The second demand is that We accept that Iran should have control over the Strait of Hormuz, which is where 20% of the global oil supply passes through every single day. So we surrender that control to Iran, and Iran should have the capacity to charge tolls to all ships that pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So that would give Iran control over uh, over sea lanes that nobody should control. Right? They're free property, open to everybody. But Iran should control it, and they should have the right to charge fees to ships passing through, and that should be a big revenue stream for the Iranian government. Another insane demand that they're making. Third, they demanded that they be able to hold on to their stock of uranium that they've enriched over a number of years. The United States had been demanding that Iran turn that over. Iran says, no, we should have the right to hold on to it. Fourth, they demanded the right to continue to enrich uranium. Of course, uranium is a necessary component to create a nuclear weapon. That's why uranium is so important to them. Fifth, they requested that the United States and Israel sign a pledge that they will never attack Iran again. And finally, the sixth request is that that Hezbollah, that is the terrorist group in Iran, that Israel sign a permanent ceasefire with Hezbollah and end their attacks on Hezbollah, and basically let Hezbollah continue to have the right to attack Israel, but Israel should never respond, right? Israel should no longer be able to attack Hezbollah. So those are the six demands made by Iran, all of them outrageous. And Iran did not back down from any of them. In contrast, what were the U.S. demands? Well, the five major U.S. demands were Iran should surrender its enriched uranium, that stockpile that it has in its possession. It's buried underground, so Iran can't access it yet. But once Iran is able to access it, they should be able to hold on to it. They should relinquish it, or the United States should be able to go in and take it out. That's number one. Second request that the United States has is Iran must end its uranium enrichment program. So not only turn over the stockpile that it has, but promise to never enrich uranium again, and open up the country to inspectors who can make sure that they're no longer enriching uranium. The third request that the United States has is that Iran should end its ballistic missile program. Yes, we've knocked out a lot of their ballistic missiles. They still have a stockpile hidden in various locations that we haven't been able to reach. But Iran would need to end its program and no longer produce more ballistic missiles. Fourth, Iran would have to relinquish its commitment to financing its proxy network. No more financing of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Lebanon, various other proxies that they have in Iraq and elsewhere. And finally, Iran would have to allow the Strait of Hormuz to be open and function normally. Stop threatening to attack ships that pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So you can see the two sides are very far apart. And even though the United States claimed that some progress was made, it's clear that on these substantive issues, no progress was made. Now, therefore, J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner, they basically walked out of the room. They said goodbye. They told President Trump, we're not making any headway, and this is a giant waste of time. So it's time to go home. Now, based on what we know from these negotiations, we can make two observations. Observation number one, based on the recalcitrant position that Iran has taken, they clearly believe that they are in the driver's seat. They can make extreme demands, and they believe ultimately they can hold on to these demands because they think Trump is the one that is desperate for a deal. And that's why they didn't budge whatsoever. They think Trump is the one that's going to ultimately back down, and the Iranians can just wear Trump down. Okay. And basically, their weapon to wear Trump down is the Strait of Hormuz and oil prices and gasoline prices. And the world will continue to pressure Trump. The U.S. media and all the pundits in the United States will continue to say that the U.S. is creating a catastrophe for the United States and the world, and ultimately Trump will break. Okay. That's why Iran comes with such extremist demands and they don't budge. So that's the first observation we make, that Iran believes they're in the driver's seat. The second observation we can make is Iran believes this because in every negotiation that has taken place prior to Iran negotiating with President Trump, Iran has always gotten its way, right? With every prior US president, dating all the way back to 1978, when this Iranian regime took power, right? That was when Jimmy Carter was president of the United States. Iran has won every single negotiation. It got its way most dramatically under President Obama and then under Biden. And because of decades of winning against the United States at the negotiating table, the Iranians haven't wrapped their heads around the idea that Trump is different, that Trump doesn't fold. He has yet to fold. That's why we're in this war. And this concept of taco, Trump always chickens out, it's just not accurate. No matter how many times you read it in the media, no matter how many times you see it in social media, when it comes to Iran, Trump has never chickened out. He's never backed down. He's held his ground. But because of all the decades of experience with prior US presidents, the Iranians believe it's only a matter of time before Trump will behave just like all the other presidents that came before him. Now, let's go back to the first observation, that Iran believes it's in the driver's seat, right? They believe they're in the driver's seat because they think they have more endurance, more stamina to withstand pain than the Trump administration has. And I believe they are drastically overestimating their hand and dramatically underestimating Trump's hand, right? It's like a poker game. Each side has its hand, its deck of cards. The Iranian regime is looking at their deck of cards and they think they have an amazing deck. And they think that the deck that Trump is holding is very weak. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Trump still has powerful weapons. Iran, on the other hand, has used its most effective weapons. What are Iran's most effective weapons? Well, number one, they have ballistic missiles and drones. And with those missiles and drones, they've hit Israel, they've hit their Arab neighbors, but it didn't have the desired effect. They thought, but by hitting Israel, the Israeli population would turn against the Netanyahu government. It didn't happen. The Israeli public is unified behind this war. They think there's no other option other than defeating the Iranian regime. So it didn't work against Israel. What about against the Arab countries? Well, as each missile hit the Arab neighbors, Iran's Arab neighbors, what happened? It backfired. The Arab countries became increasingly convinced that they had no other choice but to back the United States and to back Israel in this war. And in fact, by Iran striking out against the Arab countries, It's brought these Arab countries closer to the United States and closer to Israel, something that the Iranians never imagined would happen. And they're still in denial about it. They still don't recognize it as true, but any close observer can see that it's true. Their other weapon, and this is the more powerful weapon, and I'd say it's the only weapon that they have left, is their ability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Okay. How do they shut it down? Simply by making threats that any oil tanker that passes through the strait will be attacked. And that's it. That threat was enough to ensure that no oil tankers or any other merchant ships would dare pass through. So effectively, the Strait of Hormuz has been closed down. No one has dared run the risk. Because if you had a multi-million-dollar ship and you worried that it would be attacked by drones or missiles, you probably wouldn't take that risk either. But why has this weapon now been taken away from the Iranians? Because we have made the decision 48 hours ago to begin a blockade. So no Iranian ships are now allowed to pass through the strait. And additionally, the plan is for us to open up the strait to all other ships. The only ships that can't go through are ships that want to bring Iranian exports out of the strait and bring imports into Iran through the strait. But any other ships can pass through. That's the goal. We're not there yet, right? We're not there to the point that Saudi ships can pass through and United Arab Emirates ships can pass through and Kuwaiti ships can pass through. That hasn't happened yet, but that's the plan. In order to accomplish that plan, first we need to clear the strait of all the mines, and that process has begun. It's going to be a slow process, but it will be completed. Nevertheless, the Iranian regime, again, thinks it has more stamina and more endurance. But now we have turned the table on Iran, and we are strangling Iran economically. So we're going to see who has more stamina. So to use the language that they use in the military, we're going to see who has the capacity to climb the escalation ladder. What does that mean? What's the escalation ladder? The escalation ladder is who can escalate this economic war better. Do we have more weapons? Do we have more tools to squeeze them? Or do they have more tools and weapons to squeeze us? Again, in my opinion, it's not, I'm getting my opinion based on the opinions of great experts, far greater than I. It's just that I spend my entire day listening to a lot of people. It's clear to me, based on all this research, that Iran has used up their most powerful weapons, and we have much more to do. We have many more weapons. We have not pulled out our bazookas yet. We are in the process of cutting off all of their exports and cutting off all the imports coming into the country. We can do more. The Iranian regime holds money in the banking system of several other countries. They have money in Qatar, in the Qatar banks. They have money in the banks of the United Arab Emirates. They have money in the banks of Oman. They have money in the banks of Hong Kong. And they have money in the banks of China. We can cut off a lot of that access. Okay. Maybe China won't cooperate, but all these other countries probably will cooperate. So we can squeeze the exports and imports that Iran is sending out exports and bringing in imports. We can squeeze that and bring that close to zero. And we can also dramatically diminish their access to any cash that they hold in international banks. We even have the ability to ramp it up further. If we want, we can attack their energy supplies, right? Trump had threatened last week that he was going to begin to attack all their power plants and shut down all the energy in the country. We could attack their water supplies so they wouldn't have any access to water, right? We have many, many weapons. We can continue to go up the escalation ladder until we strangle them completely. It all depends on how much pain we want to put them through. The problem is if you go up so high that you cut off all the water supplies, right, all the energy supplies, you're punishing the people of Iran just as much as you're punishing the regime. We can do it, right? If we want to bring the regime to its knees in a second, we can do it. But we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to take other measures first. And that's why it's called climbing the escalation ladder. The ultimate top step of the ladder would probably be, water, right? Once you make a decision, I'm going to cut off their water, right? You're basically killing the entire country. We're probably not going to take it to that level, but that's the ultimate last step of an escalation ladder. What can Iran do? Well, they're probably already at their peak level, and it's being taken away from them, which was the Strait of Hormuz. So they've gone as high up the ladder as they can possibly go, in all likelihood, unless they have some tricks up their sleeves that we don't really know about, but probably not. We've probably seen them take their last step up their ladder. So the U.S. and Israel, up until now, have been fighting. If you're in a fight, right, you can fight with boxing gloves, right? And that cushions the blow a little bit. And the US and Israel have been fighting with both gloves on up till now. But now we've made the decision to take one of the gloves off, right? The blockade is taking one of the gloves off. And now the blows we're going to deliver, these are economic blows. They're not military blows anymore. We've shifted to a new phase of the war, and we're hitting them economically. So it raises a question, right? All these people saying the US is losing. Trump is desperate to end this war. And that's why he went to a ceasefire. And that's why he's about to go to another, extend the ceasefire. And that's why he's showing up at the negotiating table. If we were really winning, why don't we just finish the job? Why do we enter ceasefires? Right? It's a legitimate question. Well, the conclusion of the critics is, well, we're doing this because we're losing. But let's really understand that conclusion, it's because we're losing, it comes from two factors. Number one, these critics really can't stand Trump and they want us to lose. In fact, one of the most prominent opinion writers at the New York Times, named Thomas Friedman, just last week, he said openly, right? This news clip went viral. I saw it. He openly said, I think Iran is bad, but I really don't want the United States to win, because if the United States wins, that means Trump and Netanyahu are going to win. And those two are really bad human beings. So I'd rather Iran win than have Trump and Netanyahu win. So that ideological view lies behind a lot of the analysis we see. It colors the analysis. So that's one reason why people conclude that we're losing and Trump is about to surrender, because this is what they want, how they want it to be. So it clouds their analysis. A lot of people can't distinguish between their own desires and what's actually happening on the ground. So that's one explanation. But there's another explanation, which is people really don't do their homework, right? They don't dig into the weeds to really try to understand deeply what's happening. And it's not so easy to figure out what's going on. But let's understand what's going on. Why did the US and Israel agree, okay, ceasefire? Well, prior to the ceasefire, And this may come as a bit of a shock. I was surprised by it. But the United States and Israel had actually successfully hit somewhere between 90 to 95% of the military targets that they felt they could hit from the air. Okay. So, from a military standpoint, the job is nearly complete. So, when you hear Trump say, we won, the war is almost over, this is what he's talking about. From a pure military standpoint, we've hit all the military targets we could hit, right? They no longer have an air force. They no longer have a navy. We've taken out a huge percentage of their missile stockpiles. We've taken out a huge percentage of their missile launchers. We've taken out most of their missile manufacturing capabilities. We've taken out, uh, you know, dozens and dozens of political leaders and military leaders. We've struck nearly every single headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. We've taken out, a lot of the Basij headquarters, which is their paramilitary force, right? So we have defeated them militarily, right? Again, 90 to 95% of the targets that we could strike from the air, mission complete. So it makes sense now to take a pause. Again, militarily, this has been a decisive win. But we have not reached the goals of the war. What were the goals of the war? Number one, Iran must surrender its enriched uranium, right? It's buried somewhere, but they're not willing to surrender it. Number two, Iran must agree to no longer enrich uranium in the future. They're not willing to do that. Number three, yes, we've destroyed a lot of their ballistic missiles, but they still have a stockpile. And they still could even though we've destroyed their missile manufacturing, it could take them 2-3 years, but they could start manufacturing ballistic missiles again. Number four, we don't have any commitment from the Iranians that they're going to stop funding and training their proxy network, right? We need them to do that. And fifth, we need to get them to relinquish the Strait of Hormuz. Now, this one we can accomplish by force, and we're in the process of doing that. But the first four I mentioned, we haven't accomplished our goals, right? We may have conquered them militarily, but we still haven't achieved our goals of the war. So a military victory is not enough. So we went into a ceasefire. And we went to the negotiating table to see if the Iranians were capable of recognizing the military defeat that they just underwent. And if they recognize the military defeat, maybe they would surrender to our objectives, right? Hand over these 5 objectives that I mentioned. Say, you won, we lose. Now, I want to say right here that if Trump actually believed that they were going to give up the ghost, give up and surrender these 5 war objectives, if he actually believes it, and I think there's a piece of Trump that does believe it. I want to be completely transparent. I like to believe, and I do believe, that Trump is super calculating, that he's a few steps ahead in this when it comes to Iran, that he's got plan A, B, C, and D. They're playing checkers and we're playing a very sophisticated game of chess. I do believe that. But at the same time, I also believe that Trump and certainly his negotiating team, they don't truly understand this Iranian regime. I think they treat they view this Iranian regime as effectively criminals. Okay, bad criminals, evil criminals, but criminals. When in reality, the Iranian regime are madmen. Now, what's the difference between a criminal, even a bad, hardened criminal, and a madman? A criminal, if you punish them hard enough, if you jail them, if you slap them around, you can get them to behave the way you want them to behave, right? You can get them to stop being a bad criminal. A madman, on the other hand, you can never change their behavior. You have to kill them. There's no other alternative. You have to eliminate them from existence, right? We've seen that throughout history. There are some people who are evil to the level of an Adolf Hitler, where you need to just wipe them off the face of the earth. Trump, I believe, still thinks you can have a discussion, and if you hit them hard enough, you can get them to change their behavior. Now, personally, I don't believe that's the case. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. That would be fantastic. If we could get them to surrender everything at the negotiating table, that would be absolutely wonderful. I just don't see it happening. Now, Trump isn't taking any chances, right? He's not taking any chances. He understands, right? His base cases, maybe they're criminals, but I understand they might be madmen. And Trump is preparing for both possibilities. So he's negotiating, he's engaging in ceasefire, but at the same time, he's sending reinforcements. We have more military assets coming to the region and coming quickly. Why is that? Because we're going to continue to squeeze them economically. Okay. Now, we started to squeeze them economically just before the ceasefire was announced last Friday, right? Our bombing campaign switched from only focusing on military targets to hitting petrochemical plants. And now we've eliminated their petrochemical industry, right? That, along with oil, their other major industry is petrochemicals, which are a derivative of oil. We also took out their steel manufacturing plants. Why? Why steel? Well, steel is necessary for producing missiles, but it's also necessary for construction. We wiped that out. We also have begun to wipe out their railroads. We've taken out a few bridges and roads. So these are all ways of squeezing the regime economically, right? And then we get the ceasefire announced last Friday. Now, again, people, when they heard ceasefire, I want to emphasize this, they began to say taco. Trump always chickens out. Trump couldn't take the pain, right? That was last Friday. Trump couldn't take the pain. He's a chicken. Now, I just want to remind you that just the day before, on Thursday, Trump sent out that tweet, right, on Truth Social that went viral. Trump said, "We are going to end the Iranian civilization unless you give in to my demands," right? And people were screaming. The very same people who were saying taco just the day before were accusing Trump of genocide, mass murder, right? They were saying Trump is absolutely uncontrollable because of this tweet. So one day they're saying Trump's aggression is at a genocidal level that knows no bounds. And the very next day, the very same people were saying Trump is surrendering. Okay. Guys, you can't have it both ways. I'm sorry. He can't be a genocidal maniac one day and surrendering the next. I'm just pointing this out. This is a little bit of an aside, but it's relevant. The contradictory arguments that the same people are making about Trump and his approach to Iran. But what's the reality? What's the reality? During the 2-week ceasefire, which ends on Tuesday, and maybe it gets extended for another 2 weeks, we can see that during this ceasefire, the U.S. military is preparing. They're bringing new forces into the region. So, is this a sign that the United States is surrendering? No. Not at all. It's quite the opposite. Is this a sign that Trump is desperate for a deal? Absolutely not. Trump is not desperate for a deal. He's looking for a win, and there's a big difference. Now, if Trump is if he's making an error, his error is he thinks the Iranian regime are a bunch of criminals. And he's not putting enough weight on the idea that perhaps they're madmen and not criminals. But more important than bringing in new forces to the region, during those negotiations last weekend, the US administration did something very sophisticated. And this is where it gets to Trump playing like a sophisticated game of chess while Iran is playing a simple game of checkers. During those negotiations, US warships started to clear mines that were dropped by the Iranians. They started to clear mines from the Strait of Hormuz as the negotiations were taking place in Pakistan. So, as these talks are taking place, simultaneously, we're stripping Iran's only useful weapon, its only point of leverage. We are taking it away, stripping away those landmines so that at some point, the world will be able to move their oil tankers through the strait. So Iran has been holding the world hostage because 20% of the global oil supply goes through the strait, and we're taking away that weapon as we are negotiating with them. That is brilliant. Then immediately after the talks break down, Trump announces this blockade. And now I want to be a little bit more clear. The blockade is not really on the Strait of Hormuz. You're going to read, perhaps you might read it, I've read it, that ships, Iranian ships have gone through the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, that's true. But that's not really what we're blocking. We're not blocking the Strait of Hormuz. What we are blocking is all of Iran's ports. Their ports, which aren't in the strait, but by blocking their ports, Iran can no longer export anything and they can no longer import anything. So essentially, that means it's game over for the Iranian economy. And if it's game over for the Iranian economy, the Iranian regime has lost its ability to finance itself. Okay, that's what's coming. In the first 48 hours, absolutely no ships have been able to break through this US naval blockade. Okay. Now, on an annualized basis, right, over the course of the year, if this blockade were to remain in place, it would cause $400 billion worth of damage to the Iranian economy. $400 billion. That happens to be the size of the entire Iranian economy. So you absolutely paralyze this government. So if you think the military hits that we've delivered have been painful, okay, this is a multiple of that, several multiples of that. This is what I mean. We can climb the escalation ladder. Iran has not felt pain yet, but it will soon. So if this is a game of stamina, who's going to have more stamina? Who's going to experience more pain? The United States and Israel or Iran? How can Iran win if we were absolutely shutting down its economy? And we have more weapons. We can keep escalating, but there really is nothing more they can do to hurt us. So the plan, the ultimate plan here is for the United States to open up the Strait of Hormuz for everyone except for Iran. Iran will not be able to export or import anything. So Iran talks very, very tough. And the US media loves to be the cheerleader of the Iranian regime. It does. That's just the simple truth. And the US keeps saying that Iran has more capacity to endure pain than we do. But I hope I've sketched out the more realistic uh, scenario of who's going to experience more pain and who's going to be capable of withstanding that pain. It's Iran. The pain they're going to experience is almost infinite, and the pain that we're experiencing is trivial, right? Our stock market is now approaching all time highs yet again. Oil prices are below $100. We really aren't experiencing very much pain. Bottom line, Iran really is at the mercy of the United States and Israel. That's just the objective analysis. And Trump, maybe he has a little bit of a illusion that he can make a deal with these guys. But at the same time, he's demonstrating a clear commitment to achieve the objectives that he set out at the beginning of this war. I just kind of, I want to make sure I stay true to the title. Is Trump backing down? Are we losing? Is Trump a chicken? And let me just ask you a question. Why should Trump back down now when he didn't back down earlier in the war? Iran has never been weaker. Iran has never been more vulnerable. And we have never been in a stronger position relative to Iran than we are at this very moment, right? The United States and the Trump administration, we could have gone soft a long time ago. Why would we surrender anything now? Why would we make any concession to Iran now when Iran is so vulnerable with so much more of a limited ability to inflict pain on us? It just makes no sense. The people who make the case that we're losing, I do not know what they're looking at. Okay. I just want to ask a question, right? This is a relevant question. Why did Trump take so long? It's only now that we're opening up the Strait of Hormuz. Why didn't we do this weeks ago? Well, one answer is that we were using our military assets to devastate Iran's military capabilities. Okay. And that's certainly one answer. But there may be another answer as well that's even more interesting. And I can't promise you it's true, but I've heard it from very, very high level people. So I wouldn't dismiss it. I would take it seriously. Again, the question is, why did we wait to now to clear the Strait of Hormuz for international traffic? Right? Not for Iranians. For Iran, it's going to be closed. For everyone else, it's going to be open. Why do we wait till now to open it up? And here's a possibility. Oil tankers internationally are now lining up to buy oil from the United States, right? They can't go through the Strait of Hormuz anymore. They haven't been able to go through the Strait of Hormuz since the war began on February 28th. So, in a matter of a little over a month, the entire supply chain of oil has shifted away from the Strait of Hormuz towards the United States. Demand for U.S. oil is skyrocketing. That gives U.S. oil producers a big incentive to start ramping up their oil production because the demand for U.S. oil is the highest it's ever been in all of history. So we are seeing a major swing in the economic balance of power towards the U.S. as the major global oil supplier in the world. And this is what we gained by not opening up the Strait of Hormuz immediately, but by delaying it. U.S. oil producers right now are in a position to make an absolute fortune. We are the most reliable oil producer in the world. That's the message we are sending, right? Will the Strait of Hormuz ever be trusted ever again? Or does it make sense for other countries to permanently reset their trading partners when it comes to oil towards the United States? And we have Venezuela sitting there as well because of the political changes going on there also. So between the United States and Venezuela, we can satisfy global oil demand in a way that we never could. And maybe Trump is trying to take advantage of this. So very interesting. So what about the negotiations that are might take place in the next few days, right? These are the rumors swirling. Maybe the ceasefire extends. Again, here Trump is being incredibly, incredibly sophisticated in his strategy. We can negotiate. We can have a ceasefire. That just means that no bullets are flying. But the economic war continues. As negotiations go on, we continue to squeeze the Iranian economy with a blockade, right? The blockade continues, and we put Iran more and more up against the wall. I just want to address one final issue. You'll hear on social media, you'll hear from certain podcasters, you'll hear in the US media that it's Israel that's pushing the United States, right? The United States would have never gone into this war if it weren't for Israel. But let's make something very clear. The United States has much bigger and more aggressive goals in this war than Israel does, right? It's the United States' war much more than it is Israel's war. Let me make this point clear. What are Israel's goals? They don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. They don't want Iran to have ballistic missiles because Iran hits Israel with its ballistic missiles. They don't want Iran to have proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas because those proxies attack Israel. Okay. Now, the United States shares those goals with Israel. We share those goals with Israel. But in addition to those three goals, the United States has four other goals that Israel doesn't necessarily need to pursue. And these four other goals are superpower goals. So the United States is a superpower. Israel is not. What are these four superpower goals? The United States wants Iran to change its alliances away from China and Russia to the United States. This is exactly what Trump accomplished with Venezuela. Venezuela was in bed with China, Russia, and Iran. And now Venezuela only answers to the United States. That's exactly what Trump wants to accomplish with Iran. Okay. What's another superpower goal? Number two, I mentioned this. He wants to bring Iranian oil into the global marketplace and out of the black market, because in the black market, it provides incredibly cheap oil to China. And that helps the Chinese economy immensely, this incredibly cheap source of oil. China used to have cheap Venezuelan oil. Venezuela was selling its oil well below market prices to China, and Iran sells its oil well below market prices to China. And that really helps the Chinese economy hum. But you strip that away, and the Chinese economy is going to face more problems. So that's another superpower goal. Number three, the United States wants to make sure that Iran can never use the Strait of Hormuz as a weapon ever again. Now, that's not an Israeli objective because Israel doesn't depend on oil from the Strait of Hormuz. It gets its oil elsewhere. And in fact, the price of Israeli oil is so high, it's so high that this 70-cent increase that we've experienced in the United States in oil, Israeli oil is already so high. When an Israeli sees their oil prices go up by 70 cents, it means nothing to them. They barely even notice it because oil prices in Israel are already so high. Another 70 cents doesn't move the needle. For us, it's painful. For them, it's not because Israelis are wealthy. They're not, but they pay so much for gas. They pay like double what we pay. So it's just not a big deal. Another 70 cents. And again, Israel doesn't get its oil from the Strait of Hormuz. The United States we don't get our oil from the Strait of Hormuz either, but we're very sensitive to oil prices globally. And therefore we care about the Strait of Hormuz. So that's another superpower goal, right? The United States has to worry about global shipping lanes being open. The final superpower goal that the United States has is they want to win the superpower rivalry between the United States and China. We want to be the global hegemon, not for the sake of power, but simply because we are safer, the world is more stable when the United States is the dominant superpower in the world. And when China is the dominant superpower in the world, that is a big problem for US security and for global security. So by pulling Iran away from China towards the United States, that weakens China and it strengthens the US. Again, these are superpower goals. So is Israel pushing the United States around? Absolutely not. The United States has much bigger goals, is much more ambitious, wants much more from this war than Israel wants. So how do we accomplish these goals? Well, through one of two ways. Either the regime surrenders or the regime collapses. There's just no other way, right? Surrender or collapse. Trump is trying to get them to surrender at the negotiating table. That's probably naive. Ultimately, this probably can only come about through regime collapse. Now, I'll tell you something interesting. The head of the Israeli Mossad just yesterday said the following. He said this war is going to end. And when it ends, the regime probably will still be standing. But that's not the end of the story. And he said that the Mossad is already preparing the next phase. After major military operations are complete, we will begin to see maximum support for the Iranian people. We will begin to see maximum efforts by the Mossad, perhaps the CIA as well, to fracture the regime from the inside. And we will apply maximum pressure through covert means to bring down the regime. That will be the third phase of the war. It's a phase that we won't see, right? Missiles won't be flying. So phase one was the military conflict. Phase two, we're seeing now, is putting Iran through tremendous economic pain through this blockade and other mechanisms. Phase three will be covert. And that will happen even after we hear the war is over. Because the only way for both Israel and the United States to achieve all these objectives is through the process of bringing down this regime. And I don't think the United States, at least President Trump and Israel, are going to rest until that objective is achieved. So who's winning? Who's winning? Well, the war has not been won, but there's no way in the world any serious objective analyst can conclude that Iran is winning and that Trump is about to surrender. I don't think Iran is about to surrender. I think we have a long way to go, but there's no question that the United States and Israel are winning. We have the upper hand. Okay, let's see if we have any questions, comments.
Seth.
Hey, Alan.
Hey, Alan. Hey. Um, so, um, do you think possibly we could resume military action against Iran at the end of the ceasefire? And do you think that Israel might do any more, um, I guess you say, assassinations of the leaders, the ones they haven't come to an agreement?
Yeah. Um, so let's just play this out a little bit. Let's say we go to another round of negotiations. Uh, let's assume that Iran, it's impossible for me to believe that Iran is actually going to give the United States what it wants. It's not going to surrender its uranium and the various other items we mentioned. And then what? Um, well, we have the blockade, and probably at some point is going to respond to that blockade. They're not all their revenue going to have to try to attack. They'll either attack a ship or one of the Gulf nations, or who knows what their targets will be. And then I think we military force.
Hey,
So
Seth,
I
on
do envision that we're going to see a return to the military conflict. I think this is probably temporary, and we'll figure out new targets to hit. And a lot of those targets, as I said, will be climbing the escalation ladder, and it's going to get increasingly painful for the regime. It'll also, unfortunately, get more painful for the Iranian people. But I think we probably won't have a choice.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Anybody else?
Hey, Seth.
Hey,
Robert.
Tyler.
It's Rommel.
Oh, sorry. Where's that coming from?
Rommel.
Hey, Rommel.
How are you?
Good. How about you?
Good. So I've had a couple of questions for a while now. The first one is in all this, obviously the war is Israel and the U.S., right? But every time there are talks or the media is talking about ceasefire and negotiations, it's only the U.S. And my guess is that, well, first, Israel doesn't want to know anything about negotiating with Iran, but also, I guess you kind of answer that because the U.S. has a major goals in mind with the war. But it's just, I was just curious, why would, every time we hear about negotiations or talks or ceasefire, is the media only mention the U.S. and not Israel?
Yeah, Israel is not involved in these negotiations for two reasons. Reason number one is the U.S. is the superpower. And as to use Trump's own words, the United States is the big brother and Israel's the little brother. So the big brother isn't going to bring the little brother to the negotiating table. But there's another reason beyond that, which is there's no chance that the Iranians would sit down with the Israelis at a negotiating table. That's the second reason, and both are relevant. However, I will say that yesterday, the Israelis sat down with representatives from the Lebanese government, and they had a round of negotiations, which is very interesting. Now, Israel has been fighting Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization that occupies Lebanon. It's not elected. It doesn't represent the Lebanese people. It's basically an outside force, a representative of Iran that occupies Lebanese territory and uses Lebanese territory to attack Iran. So it was the Lebanese government, not Hezbollah, the Lebanese government that sat down with Israel for a set of negotiations. Now, the Lebanese government has no control over Hezbollah. They do not want Hezbollah in their territory. But it's the first time that representatives from Lebanon and Israel sat down together. And out of that meeting, they announced the common objective of ending Hezbollah. Now,
No.
the Lebanon does not have that power. They have a very weak military. They don't have the political will. They don't have the military might to do that. But it was a first time that ever happened. And what does that mean? Why would the Lebanese government do it? Why would they come out and publicly say that? It's because they're losing their fear of Iran. If they thought that Iran was strong and capable of inflicting pain on the Lebanese government, they wouldn't have the courage to do that. But they see the direction. They see Iran weakening. They see Iran on its back foot. They see Hezbollah also weakening dramatically and on its back foot. So that gives them the courage to meet with the Israelis and come out publicly and say, our enemy, we share a common enemy with Israel, and our common enemy is Hezbollah, and therefore it's Iran, because Iran is the sponsor of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the representative of the Iranians, of the Iranian regime. So that's very interesting. So there was a parallel negotiation going on. It's just an interesting point.
It's a positive note, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yes.
And the other question is, do you think that maybe there are some actors within the Iranian government that are willing to negotiate or to comply with the requests from the U.S., but the IRGC is just too powerful within the political apparatus of Iran to let that happen, and there's that. It seems to be a struggle there. That IRGC more involved in the politics, being that all the leadership is gone. They are more. I don't know. They have. I don't know, taking the power of the country in general. Do you think there are actors within the government that are willing to comply, or not really? You get everyone in the same bag.
You hear a lot of I don't want to call them rumors. They're probably better than just a rumor, because there have been statements made in public by certain representatives in the government. They don't necessarily have much power, but they have expressed this understanding that the Iranian military has been defeated, that the economy is under siege, and catastrophe is coming unless Iran really negotiates in good, honestly and in good faith.
Okay.
And perhaps, they'd be willing to surrender to the United States, but they do not, as you suggested, they do not have the power. The IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, has the power. They're the ones calling the shots, making the decisions.
Yeah.
So for all, from a practical standpoint, at this stage, those who might be willing to make concessions are not relevant. But that doesn't mean they won't be relevant in the future. And I think this is where, when we talk about the covert actions that are likely to come in the future, these segments, some of them probably in the government, they may become very relevant. And as part of those covert operations, you're going to see more and more of the recalcitrant hardline RGC people get eliminated, their lives, made miserable, and efforts to support those who are willing to negotiate, those people may be bolstered. So this is when the covert operations will become more and more important, and these fractures are likely to deepen. And the United States and Israel are going to want to leverage those fractures.
Okay. Thank you, Seth.
Thanks, Rommel. Good question.
Hey, Seth, I had a question. So last year, the Israel and the U.S. bombed the nuclear sites, and then part of the thinking behind going into the war this year was that somehow they had continued, on their nuclear path with their uranium enrichment, et cetera. So any negotiations that are going on in the next little while, no matter what they say and agree to, won't they just keep trying to do it anyway? If the regime is more or less still in power, it's the son now instead of the previous guy. But they're, like you said, if they're fanatical, they'll just keep doing what they're doing. So our negotiations are just for what would be the word, for show, so to speak, and they don't really hold any power, if that's the right word.
Yeah, I mean, you've basically all the reputable, honest Iran watchers, anytime any U.S. administration goes to the negotiating table, including the Trump administration, they all begin to worry, here we go again. Another U.S. president is about to get fooled and fall into, the Iranian trap where they promise, and then they're experts at concealing and manipulating, deceiving. And, they can, so the U.S. thinks they reached an agreement and they think, they achieved something. And down the road, the U.S. got duped again. So that continues to be, I get worried every time I see us go to the negotiating table. Now, so far, Trump has not been fooled, right? And I trust that he will continue to not be fooled. But you've definitely just articulated the nightmare scenario, which is not that far-fetched. I mean, I think it's something we need to be concerned about.
Yeah, that's something I had thought about too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no question. The Iranians have always made promises um, and not lived up to them.
And just as an aside, I would say the same thing about Putin. Obviously, Ukraine and Russia are on the back burner now, so to speak. But any negotiations that would come about with Putin would be meaningless too, because he has no integrity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, Seth.
Yes.
Hey, probably more just a comment of what I learned today. The biggest thing that I keep hearing um, as I fly with guys and we get off talking about this topic is, why does the U.S. feel like it has the um, authority to be the world police and tell Iran whether they can hold uranium or not, right? And the only thing that I know to say is, obviously they've been trying to say for the last 40 some odd years that they're going to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, right? And so we feel like we have to go in there and stop that. But I think the other enlightenment from your topic is just the fact of the oil and how it's a positioning greater than just our Iran of becoming, of cutting off that relationship with China, selling that oil to them. So it's like when you said that, immediately I thought about Venezuela, and then you mentioned Venezuela. It's like, okay, we took Venezuela, now we're taking Iran. It's ultimately just positioning between us and China. So it seems like a multi-step thing, and it's all about oil and money and power. And so it just gave me greater insight to it's not so much just about uranium, but ultimately a greater plan. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I want to give two analogies that I always find helpful. They're the same analogy, but I'm going to express it in two different ways. Let's say you're in a canoe and you're on one end of the canoe. There's another guy who's at the other end of the canoe, and you see he's got um, a screwdriver, and he's pounding in the bottom of the canoe. And you go up to you scream at the guy, "What are you doing? You're gonna put a hole in the bottom of the canoe." And the guy says to you, "What do you care? It's under my seat. It's not under your seat." And you're like, "Bro, you're gonna sink the whole canoe." He was like, "What's it? It's not your business. This is under my seat." Okay, I'm gonna give you another analogy. You live on a street and you hear that there's a guy on the street who's a child molester. And he's molesting the children across the street. Now, you could take the attitude, you know what? It's really not my business. It's not my kids. That other family needs to take care of it. Okay. Let's say you take that attitude. Now, you might say, look, I'm a decent human being. I care what happens to other, but let's take like the approach where you're sort of an extremist. You really don't care about, you only care about your family. You only care about your children. Well, it's just going to be a matter of time before this guy's coming after your children, right? When there is an evil actor in the world, right? To think that that evil actor is not going to have an impact on your country, it really is not very different from the two examples. It may be more slow moving, but it's coming to a theater near you. There is just no doubt about it. And like a real deep reading of history makes that point crystal clear. You cannot have a powerful regime like Iran that's teaming up with China and Russia, and to think that is not going to be terribly damaging to the United States, terribly damaging to the United States. It already has been. People forget this point that over 1,000 Americans have been killed by Iranians. And it hasn't stopped. And it only gets worse. And if Iran did have a nuclear bomb, right? They have a nuclear weapon. Look what they did to the Strait of Hormuz without a nuclear weapon. If Iran had a nuclear weapon, there is zero chance we would be opening up the Strait of Hormuz. Zero chance. We'd be terrified. Iran could do anything it wanted in the world with a nuclear weapon. Why? We can't do anything we want with a nuclear weapon because we're not madmen. We're not insane, and the world knows that we're not insane. If Iran actually felt that if we get angry at them, we drop a nuclear bomb on their country, they would never do what they're doing. But we know for sure if they had a nuclear weapon, they would drop it in our country. There's no doubt about it. They would. Once they get a nuclear weapon, to think, oh, it's not our business if Iran gets a nuke. Are you kidding me? They essentially control the world with a nuclear weapon because everyone knows they'd use it. A madman with a weapon gets to do whatever he wants. A good, sane human being with a dangerous weapon, he's probably not going to use it. All right, guys. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your questions, and we will get back at it on Friday. Missed you guys. Take care.
See you, Seth. Thanks so much.
Thank you.